Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This is Harold Arnold, Realtor, Illinois Real Estate Partners, and host of the Keeping It Real Estate Show. I'm keeping it real. I'm keeping it real estate. I'm on Intellectual Radio right now, which is an iHeart station. And I'm also going to tell you that I'm in the studio with the other Winfrey, Mr. Earl Winfrey, who's the CEO producer of IntellectualRadio.com and who is working the knobs for me today. And let me tell you, I'm going to start out fiery today because my subject and my topic is politics in real estate. Politics in real estate. And I'm going to be talking about all of that and putting it together because I want you to know some of the things that are happening. And first of all, I'm going to say I'm glad to see that last Tuesday's Super Tuesday has passed. And as you know, Illinois was one of 5 states that was won by the big winner. And that's Secretary Hillary Clinton. She won Illinois and she won 4 other states. Let me also tell you that Congresswoman Tammy Duckworth won the Democratic primary for Illinois, and she'll be running against the Senator Mark Kirk. Let me also tell you that attorney Anita Fox, who we've had a number of commercials about, she won the state attorney against Anita Alvarez. But this is the primary. We still have to come out and vote for these people. And the last one I'm going to mention is attorney Juliana Stratton, who took the state rep primary in the 5th district of Chicago. So there were 4 ladies, and I posted them on my Facebook. 4 ladies that ended up winning big here in Illinois. And that's not to discount other people. There were a number of other races, but these were what I called the big races. And when it comes down to politics, it is all interrelated. And I'm going to tell you why. And it goes with real estate real easy, the politics. And when it comes to the politics, you have to be careful. So you have to know the difference between the politics and the politics when it comes to real estate. Now, when it comes to politics, the government does a lot of things because who you put in politics in government makes a big difference. I read my Facebook, and let me tell you, I'm on, as I mentioned before, I'm on all the social networking, the big ones. That's Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn. Those 3, Google Plus, and I'm also on Instagram. And I have a lot of followers. In fact, I have a time getting people on my Facebook. However, you can always get on my Facebook page, which is facebook.com/Harold.Arnold2A. That's my business page. So Harold.Arnold2A. So you get on that Facebook, you can always get on my business page. And all I do on my business page is talk about real estate. Now, on my regular page, I'm going to talk about anything. And I usually try to keep it upbeat and positive. But I do talk about politics from time to time. And let me say this to you. When it comes to politics, the government, and I happen to read some things today, like it doesn't make a difference between the Democrats and the Republicans. They both let us down and all that kind of stuff. Okay. You got to remember, there's nobody perfect. There's no human being. They're all part of human being, and human beings are part of that structure. But I will say this. There is a difference in policies between the Republicans and the Democrats. I'm not going to get into that right now. What I would advise you to do is look up what the differences are. What are the philosophies? And you can find that very easily on your smartphone by Googling. And you will find out what the philosophies are. You can look on Wikipedia. That'll give you one insight. You can just look up their philosophy in general. Differences are, and you will see there are marked differences between the Democrats and the Republicans. So when someone joins a party, because there are independents that don't believe everything that the Democrats say, and there's independents that don't believe everything Republicans say. I understand that. So then they don't have an allegiance to a party, and that's okay. But if they say they're a Democrat, most of what is in the party philosophy, they believe in. They believe in that philosophy. If they're a Republican, most of what's in the Republican philosophy, they agree with. So when someone tells me they're all the same, no, they're not. And don't believe it for 1 minute, and I'll never believe it for 1 second. There's a big difference. So when someone comes in to government, they believe in certain things. So depending on whether they're Democrat or Republican, and sometimes they'll move away from that. Sometimes you have Democrats that are to the right, as they say. They're a little bit more conservative. Sometimes you have Republicans that lean towards the left. They're a little more moderate. And then they also call some Republicans extreme right. And you have Democrats extreme left. They're liberals. They're way to the left. And they don't always agree with a moderate Democrat. There's some liberal Democrats I'm reading this morning. They hate Hillary Clinton. There's some moderate Democrats. They don't like Bernie Sanders, but they don't necessarily hate him either. So the ones that are on the extreme left have to be worked with. There were even some that said they're not going to vote, or they're going to vote for Trump, and all kind of stuff, because they're emotional and they're passionate. I understand that they're emotional, but are they thinking? That's what you have to do. Now, getting back to real estate and putting the politics with real estate, the government, it sets real estate property taxes. So depending on who you have in office, they're going to help set the property taxes. They keep all the documents. All the documents, the main document is a deed. They set the rules and regulations about the deeds. What has to be in that deed. I mentioned in one of my programs about the new rules that President Obama's administration now has in regards to the consumer protection of anyone getting a mortgage. Now, there has to be a 3-day waiting period before you can close. Once the mortgage is approved by the bank says, we're going to give you the money to buy a house. There's a 3-day waiting period. Now, would that have happened under a Republican administration? No way. Would that have happened maybe under a Clinton administration? Well, maybe now, but if she was the president, it probably would not have, because everybody has a little different way of doing things. And that's what was worked out. Then they pass out a rule and regulation through HUD. Now there's no more HUD statements. And now you get a disclosure, and you have to wait 3 days. You have to look over that paperwork, and you have to decide this is if the numbers are right. Does this protect the buyer? Yes. Can it kill some deals? Yes. Yes, it can kill some deals, especially if everybody can't get those numbers exactly right. Sometimes the numbers will rush that day, and sometimes people get emotional the same day, and they say, okay, and they bend. Well, with a 3-day period, you don't have to bend. Either you insist that this has to be, or it doesn't happen. That's where it gets to the closing of that property. Let me also say that increasing the taxes can be, I'm not saying it's a Republican thing or a Democratic thing, but that could happen. And generally, Republicans think differently about increasing taxes than Democrats. Collecting property taxes for schools. So if you collect the real estate taxes, you don't have enough real estate taxes for the schools, then that affects the schools. Because most of your schools in this country are funded through property taxes. Now, schools themselves, public schools, can increase their taxes through bonds. Sometimes that gets to be very political. Even though people running for the school board are supposed to not be political. They don't give their political designation, just like judges don't. Judges and school board members don't give political affiliations when they run. They don't say if they're a Democrat or a Republican. They just put their name down in most states. I don't think of any state that they ever put a political affiliation. But you basically, if you research their background, you basically can find out whether they're Democrat or Republican or independent. Now, the politics in various states, and this is research that I happened to find today, and this was on the CBS News in 2007. I know it's a few years back, but it still applies today. And it says in various states, people have been confused about state lotteries. Okay, everybody pushed the lotteries. That money's supposed to go to the schools and all that. Well, let me tell you something. This is where the politics comes in. An example is our good state of Illinois. Has about $208 total revenue per capita. $208, I guess, per capita is per family or something like that, which is above $189 average for all the states in the union. And there's 43 states that have lotteries revenue. But Illinois is 16th among these states. And this was found in 538magazine.com or 538.com, and it's part of a internet magazine that does statistics related to how lottery money is used. And it was in a report just 2 years ago, November 2014, written by Mona Chalabi, who also is a writer for the New York Magazine. So Illinois spends about $6.5 billion on education, with only 1/10 of that through the lottery. They get proceeds from the lottery. So about $619 million comes from the lottery. So according to one of the board members of the Illinois School Association of School Boards years ago, he said that the lottery money added to educational funding is a myth. Now, I don't agree with that because there is some money. But the lottery money simply replaces tax dollars our politicians and legislators might spend on education, but instead they use it on other projects. So they get this pot of money. What did I say? 619 million. Basically, all they're doing is transferring that money in, and then something like 300, 400 million come out of the pot, and then they distribute it in other ways. Okay, so they can put out a lottery because many states have laws that they have to put all that money into a school fund. Okay, they put it in a school fund, but the other money, they have blanket authority to maneuver. Okay, so the proceeds from other areas, they can maneuver for any kind of projects that they want because they set up the budget. The lottery money is basically restricted. So has it really made a difference? Has our schools, or should I say, are our schools properly funded? Is this going on in the state of Illinois? I don't think so, because we've all read about what's going on with Chicago. So, in other words, the statistics are saying, and this was just a few years ago, that in Illinois, the state spending on education has decreased 3%. And I figured out 3% of $6.5 billion is a $195 million cut. All right. $195 million cut from $619 million received from the lottery. So there's a lot of games played. This is the politics. They tell people one thing and then they do another thing. According to today's, I found this today, Salon.com, there is no such thing as a middle class in normal capitalism. This is what they're saying. Inequality is a default option. The GOP, President Reagan, the late President Reagan, they blamed it on him first because he began deregulating and cutting taxes on capitalism in 1981. And this began what they call Reaganomics, or supply side economics, in which the nation's largest employer right today is Walmart, which I mentioned last week's program. Walmart is the nation's largest employer now. And they're paying people around $10 an hour on average. But their owners are some of the richest billionaires on the planet. And a lot of that happened because they made drastic cuts in income tax. And they're saying that back in the day, some people had between 75 to 90% of their taxes, of their income in taxes, especially the highest earners. So it didn't make them a lot of difference if they went and tried to get another billion, because they say Uncle Sam is going to take it anyway. So many times they would push that money down to the employers, and you had a middle class. When Mr. Reagan came in And he showed what he could do with Patco, get rid of the union, he fire everybody, and he dropped the rates down as low as 28%. So some people had 75% income tax down to 28% income tax. All right. So they said, oh, yeah, I'm going to try to get out there and make more money. The more money I can make, this is great. All right. So some of them went out there and start making more money. So you got more billionaires. You got more multimillionaires. You got more millionaires. And guess what? They're paying people to do work for them at what? $10 an hour? And they're crying if someone wants to make $15 an hour. We got to stop that. Oh, $15? Oh, no, that's too much money. Now, some of the small businesses are crying. I can understand that because maybe they'll have to have less employees because they're more on a tight string diet. Not diet, but salary schedule. They have a tight budget. That's what I meant to say. But now you got a number of people that look at this, and some of these millionaires, multimillionaires, billionaires, they don't want their income taxes going up. And I guess if I was in that same position, I probably, so I'm going to be honest with you. On the other end, they're hiring people at $10 an hour. And then the average person, so you got more people that were in the middle class, they're now called, according to this article, the working poor. Because $10 an hour, I remember 40 years ago, people making $10 an hour. $10 an hour, 40. So, I mean, that was no big thing. So that's what we got now. So we got more in the working poor. We really don't have a middle class like we used to have. And some people will tell you there's really no middle class because everybody in the so-called middle is struggling. They're a paycheck away, or they don't have any money in the bank. They're up to the kazoo. They have no credit. They have a whole lot of problems. So that's where we're at. Now, they may have a job, but their job cannot sustain them, cannot buy them a house, and things like that. And I remember the days when you only needed one parent working. Parents, and some of them are working 2 and 3 jobs. If the child is fortunate to have 2 parents. So that's where we're at. That's where we're at. And that has an effect on real estate. Because these people cannot buy homes. There's more homes that are in foreclosure now than there ever has been. Now, some of them are coming out of foreclosure. Sure, the market is getting better for those people that have been fortunate enough to get more money and get a job and things like that. And I hope that they are able to hold on to those jobs for years and years to come and build up a nest egg and do very well. But the average person is struggling. I see them all the time. And there's always a business to deal with that props up when somebody is struggling. Those realtors that are in the foreclosure business have done very well. In fact, I'll tell you this little quick story. I remember going to an office. I hadn't heard from this person. I was representing a buyer. We needed to find out about this house. He was an investor. And I wanted them. I couldn't get a hold of anybody by phone. So I got in my car. I said, I'm the type of person, if I can't get you, I'm going to find you. So I went to the office. I found him. And I talked to one of the people. And as I was waiting, I saw 4 large file cabinets. And they were, I guess you want to put a feet on it, the standard size, maybe about 5 feet in height. And there were 4 large ones. Then I saw a pile of papers or files next to those in boxes. And they were stacked up as high as the file cabinets. And I asked one of the administrative assistants, I said, what is all that? Oh, these, I'm going to tell you, sir, these are all the people that came in and put in offers. These are all the offers. I said, are they executed contracts? She said, no, not yet. They're offers of the number of properties that they had. And then this particular realtor worked for the bank. And they have to go through all that depending on the houses. But they had it all separated, and it was organized, but it was stacked. And I said to myself, no wonder it takes them a week or two to get through this stuff. And then they got to read it and figure out which is the best contract. It was ridiculous. And we finally heard from them a week later, and we didn't get that property. Someone else got it. They had a higher offer. They did ask us to make a second and best offer. So they were telling the truth, make another offer. And my client did. He went up a couple thousand, but it wasn't enough. It wasn't enough for the bank. So this was a real estate company that made a lot of money off the misery of another company. In fact, there's a movie, and I can't think of the name of the movie right now, but there's a movie about foreclosures. And it still is quite a business. There's internet companies now that do everything by the internet. You never even see, because I sold an investment property with the company through the internet for one of my investors. And I never saw the people. Everything had to be done online. The contract, the approvals, the money, everything was online. The money was done by through Visa and then directly through the bank, wired. Everything that was online, and they're a legitimate company. Otherwise, I wouldn't have dealt with it. And they were legitimate. In fact, they were on the MLS. He found them on the MLS, but the way they operated was through the internet. They sent me the code to get in the house through the internet, through an email. Everything was internet. I got the code. They had a lockbox on there. I was able to get in, show the property, and then we put the offer in. Now, we did get that property, which was good. I felt good for my investor. Nevertheless, that's the kind of a situation that's going on now. When it comes to other things like banks, the same thing is going on with the mortgages. There's people that get mortgages now that never see the mortgage broker. Everything is done through the internet. I've talked to mortgage brokers that I have yet to meet. We've talked on the phone. I know several of them. We've talked on the phone so much, I thought they were like family. But I never met them. If they walked in this door right now, I wouldn't know who they were. So the whole real estate business is different. And a lot of that is because of politics and what's expected and what can be done now. And you have to be careful because there are people out there that are not legit. So what I always tell people, get with a realtor that is legit. And that realtor is myself. I'm legit. And I do meet people. So you won't have to work with me over the internet. I will meet with you. I'll show you the house and so forth. And you can always get a hold of me through ChicagoCityHomesales.com. ChicagoCityHomesales.com. And you can always find my information, see my great looking picture, and then give me a call at 312-523-8174. And I'd love to sit down and discuss any type of real estate with you. Now, I'm going to go through a couple other items, take a short break, and then I'm going to finish up the program. Now, how does the political candidate affect real estate? Well, I did a little synopsis on Clinton, just to give you an example, on Clinton and Bernie Sanders. Now, according to Clinton, Secretary Clinton, she is going to unveil a $25 billion housing investment program out of $125 billion economic revitalization initiative. That's what she promises. According to Bernie Sanders, he's got an affordable housing plan, and he plans to break up the banks, break up the structure, investment, and traditional bank splitting, and so forth. He wants the feds to be more responsible to the American people, and he wants the feds to be under congressional control, possibly under congressional control or under the presidential control, one of the two, and the banks pay the feds a fee for deposits. So I don't know all the details on that. I'm not quite sure. But I will tell you this, he does want the Postal Service to offer banking services, especially for those people that live quite a ways from a bank or cannot work with a bank. Now, there's some things that the banks do with banking services. I'm sorry, not the banks, but the Postal Service. For example, you can get money orders there, which I understand can happen many times. You can buy things there and then get money back from your debit cards, things like that. So they have some small things that they're doing with banking now that possibly were not in existence maybe 5 or 10 years ago. So I'm going to take a quick break, minute and a half. I'm going to tell you right now, I want you to stay tuned because I'm going to talk about some more politics, maybe a little bit of politics, how we can deal with that. When I come back in the next few minutes on Intellectual Radio, keeping it real estate, I'm Harold Arnold. Stick with me. Be back in, I'd say, about 2 minutes. Thank you. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Once again, I'm back. This is Harold Arnold, keeping it real estate on IntellectualRadio.com. So pleased that many of you have been with me. And I will say this, I know a number of people are at work, but I'm going to be streaming it. I'll be streaming it later. I'm hoping today or tomorrow, getting it out to people, letting you know that you can hear this program and broadcast at your leisure. The number that you can call in if you would like to ask any questions, I'd love to have you ask questions. You can call in now at 708-223-8953. Once again, 708-223-8953. So you can call in if you have any questions. I'd love to take your call. But I will say I'm going to move forward, and I'm going to talk some more about how politics can make a difference in your real estate. And I mentioned last week, politics can make a great difference in your real estate values, the values that you have on your house, because depending on who you vote for can make a difference on whether your house goes up in value or it decreases. It used to be a time your house would just basically stay the same amount as when you bought it, or it would increase 3% or 4% a year. But now things are different. Some people are underwater in their houses, and that could be due to a lot of different situations. Now, one of the things I have mentioned and will tell people, location is very important in pricing. So location, and they're in real estate, they always talk about location. Very, very important. And what your neighbors do is very, very important. And that's one thing when you get ready to go out and look for a house, you want to make sure you're in a safe area and that the houses around there are clean, their lawns look beautiful, and they keep up with their property. Because that has an effect directly or indirectly, but I will say more so directly, on what your property is going to be worth. I mentioned I had a client, the property was beautiful. It was gated. We walked in there and the property next door was so-so, and a couple doors away was worse than that. Then the property a couple doors away had couple guys standing on the porch. Okay. Then the next thing you know, there was 6 or 8 of them. We went in the house and looked around. The house was nice, was upgraded with granites and hardwood floor and looked beautiful. And we come back out and we were still in the front yard, didn't even get to the gate, and there were about 8 people 2 doors away on the porch of this particular house. All right. The problem was they didn't look too good. Pans hanging down, rags on their head, and all that. It turned my buyer off. And she had 3 sons, and she doesn't teach them that way. I'll put it like that. And if she's listening, well, she's not listening, she's at work. But if she was listening, she would know exactly what I'm talking about. And I found her another house. Now she's very satisfied with the house. In fact, I saw her about 3 or 4 days ago at a drugstore, and we were talking. And to make a long story short, these guys were hanging on the porch. And then the next thing you know, we get to our cars, and a bunch of young ladies were in a car, and they jumped out of the car in the middle of the street. And one said some expletives to the other, and the next thing you know, They were fighting. And there were two young ladies fighting. No one was trying to break it up. Well, we didn't know the people, but the people that knew the other people, they weren't trying to break it up. In fact, one had his camera videotaping two young ladies. I guess he thought that was cute. And they're fighting like crazy. Now, this was last summer. Then the other one, then two more young ladies, and they were all around 18 to 20 years old. And they start fighting. So there was two fights going on, one in the middle of the street and one on the sidewalk at the house. Now, do you think my client bought that house? Well, I already told you she didn't. And the realtor that let us in, she had the house listed, and it was real interesting. She got out of there quick. She was behind us because my client was in her car and I was in my car. And the realtor was in her car with who she said was her sister. They backed out. This is a one-way street. They backed out of the one-way street. Flying out. They backed out of the one-way street and left us there. And she had enough nerve, the realtor had enough nerve to send me a text about 2 hours later. What did my client think? Unbelievable. I guess that's the way she was trained, like a robot. Okay, what did she think we thought? But she reached out. I will give her credit on that. The realtor did reach out to me to find out. And I said, no way, lady. Too much drama. And my client talked about that. She says, I can't believe this. She called me up. In fact, once we got out of there, they finally moved out of the street and we were able to get moving. And once we started moving, we ended up about a block. We were going in different directions. In fact, that was the last house we were looking at that day. And so she calls me up on her cell phone. I answer the cell phone. We're both driving. And she says, Harold, can you believe what we just saw? I said, no. I said, only thing I'm glad about that there was no guns. We didn't see any guns or knives, but they were definitely fighting like crazy. So that just lets you know location means a lot and what your neighbors do. Now, maybe their parents weren't at home, but they weren't supposed to be fighting. But they were old enough to be driving cars and things like that. So it tells you something. It's just really ridiculous. But then on the other end, I would tell you this. This is where you're alderpersons. And I get alderpersons that see my show or listen to my show periodically. I got a number of them, state reps and state senators too, that are on my Facebook. And so I will tell you this, they, I'm sure, know or have heard some of the things that I've said. And I keep it real. And I will say this, anybody that lives on the street that doesn't have a block club, you're going to have problems. Because without a block club or some organization where you know who's who and what they do, and you get a chance to formulate a relationship, you're going to have problems. You're going to have problems. And you may not mean to have problems, but I'm going to tell you, you're going to have problems. Now, I tell you this, in the neighborhood that I live in, we don't have a block club. But as I said before, I know my neighbors. I know them by name. I have their phone numbers. They have my phone number. I know the police chief. Okay. And I have his cell phone number. I know the numbers of the street commissioner because I've called their office, and I know the number of city hall. It's all in my phone. Look it up and hit a button. Takes a second. And that's what has to happen if you want to keep your property values up and your neighborhood right. You cannot let a minority, and it's usually 2 to 5%. And I mentioned before, I used to be a principal in the Cleveland schools. It's usually 2 to 5%. If you don't nip them in the bud and straighten them out, they'll take over. When I was teaching school, I was always taught, deal with the 2 to 5% day one. Day one. And I taught everywhere from second grade to sixth grade. And it didn't matter to me. In second grade, I just stooped down and I give them my eye. Day one. And then all I had to do, because kids are kids, is give them the eye any other time. And they straighten right up. Sixth graders the same way. I didn't put up with any that nonsense. And many times I didn't even have to talk to them. And when I was a principal, I could go in the lunchroom with 300 kids. I put my hand up, everybody's hand was up. I used to have a thing. If their hand wasn't up, they were on the wall. They didn't want to be on the wall. Because then I was going to deal with them. Had a parent or two, why my kid on the wall? Because he didn't raise his hand and listen. And watch. I'm running things here. Now, you do what you want to do with your kid at home, but while they're in school, they're under my jurisdiction. My jurisdiction. And I'm going to do what's has to be done. I don't think you can run. You can't. You know, the way I looked at it, I used to tell teachers. It was funny. I have to say this. I used to tell teachers, some of these parents can't operate their home with 1 or 2 kids. So who are they to go to your school and tell you to go to your classroom and tell you how to handle 25 or 20? So my philosophy was, hey, you handle your child the way you want to handle it at home, but when he's in school, I'm going to handle him. And if you're not doing the job at home, I'm still going to handle him or her. Because I got 400, 500, 600 kids I got to deal with. Okay? And I can manage them quite nicely. Now, can you manage yours at home the same way? Because I can manage them at school. And when it gets to the point I can't manage him at school, he's going to be at home with you. Okay, under suspension. Because I'm not going to play around with him. So, when it comes to politics in real estate, you got to get and meet your committee person, your alder person. You should go to meetings periodically. I told some people when I was working downtown in the high rise, the condominiums had condominium board meetings. And I told all my clients, you should at least go to 1 or 2 of them in a year. I said, you don't have to go to everyone. They're supposed to meet once a month. You don't need to go to everyone. Go periodically. And whatever they send you by mail or stick under your door, look at it and read it. Because they have budgets that will affect your not property taxes, there's a word for it, assessments. So if they're not managing the money's right with the condominium management, property management team and the board, then you're going to end up paying more money. There's some condominium owners and some condominium buildings, they fell in the red. So what happened? The next year, they increased their assessments. There were some, they had special assessments. Now, a special assessment, I've heard as low as $1,000. Just add it on to your bill next year. $1,000 to $15,000 or $20,000. And that's because the people in the building sat back and let these building, I call them little building politicians, do everything and tell them what to do with no accountability. And when you don't have accountability, those kinds of things happen. That's politics and real estate. I have a good friend who was on one of my shows, and she's a property manager downtown at one of the big high rises. And I'm going to tell you, her high rise is near the Trump building. Okay? You can't get bigger than that. Okay? Near the Trump building. That's where her high rise is. She's been there about 6 years. The most successful building manager they ever had. They went through building managers like clockwork, but she's been there since 6 years. But every year they had a different building manager. They couldn't do it. But they love this lady. She's been there 6 years. She took them from the red. Now they're in the black. Now they're in the black. They were in the red. And that's because of the crash. There were a number of people that left and couldn't afford the condominiums anymore, and they weren't being sold and things like that. So everybody else had to pinch in and pay because the building still has to operate. So if you got 400, I think her building has like 450 units. So you got 450 units and you got 50 people that leave. And that's what they were averaging at one time, about 50 people when she first got there. And they couldn't sell it. The prices were too high. The people didn't have money. There were all kind of problems. They were going into foreclosures. She had a bunch of foreclosures when she first started. She worked and got them down. Now she says, the last time I talked to her, which was about 6 or 7 months ago, there's no foreclosures. But they were at 50. There's no foreclosures. They're in the black. So every property has been sold. They're all paying assessments. And that's what keeps the building running. So those are some of the things. That's all. So you have many many politicians that are involved in the condominium market. And it doesn't have to be a lot of people. It could just be one. Because if you're a condominium owner, you have to pay assessments. And you need to find out what's going on. If you're in one of these smaller buildings, you better find out what's going on with your condominium management and your board. Don't let them keep you in secret. Don't let them not tell you what they talked about at their meeting. You should be allowed to go to any meeting. Any meeting. That's politics. And if you don't, it's going to cost you money. I got the signal because we're just about ready to wrap up here. I appreciate your time, especially if you're listening to me today about politics, and real estate. I'm keeping it real estate. Intellectual Radio on Mondays at 3 p.m. I love this show. I'm going to be looking for some guests. Sometimes I don't have guests because I want to pass out a lot of information. With guests, you get kind of turned around from your topic sometimes because you're asking questions and the guest has to give spontaneous answers. But when I'm giving out information, it's going to be very valuable for you, and I hope you take notes and continue to stick with me. Here or look for my link when I send it out. We're on, what's that? I've been ready to say Google Plus, YouTube. We're on YouTube now. So I'm going to be sending you something on YouTube about this show in the next day or two. Let me also tell you that the person that introduced me and brought me to this station, Pastor Angela Johnson, one sister to another, is now on Sundays at 10 o'clock. So she's no longer at 4. She's on at 10 in the morning. So Pastor Angela Johnson, doing a very nice lady, doing very well for herself. And now she's on Sunday. I kind of miss her now because it's been about a month that she's been on Sunday mornings. At 5 today, we got Roman Morrow. Drive at 5. And let me tell you, Mr. Morrow, I saw on Facebook today, he's going to have some exciting guests. Mainly the one, Pastor Jedediah Brown, who was instrumental in stopping the Donald from appearing here in Chicago. And he's going to talk about it, I'm sure. So I would encourage you to listen to that program. That's at 5 o'clock here on IntellectualRadio.com. He's also going to have some other guests, but I know Pastor Jedediah Brown has been here a few times. I've met him. Very nice man. He ran for alderperson. One of the times I saw him, he was running for alderperson. And unfortunately, he lost, but I think he's getting the name around. He's one of these energetic, young, activist pastors here in Chicago now. And he's all over the internet. You could see him on CNN at the so-called Trump rally that never happened at UIC. He was really involved in that one. And we're going to have Rhea Ray with us. Straight No Chaser. She's on at 6 o'clock p.m. She always does a great job. I've had her on my station, on my program a few times. She knows all about Chicago. The lady is right with it. And she always has interesting guests. So that wraps it up here on IntellectualRadio.com. Keeping it real estate. You can always contact me through my fantastic website, ChicagoCityHomeSales.com. And I'll be glad to work with you. Just contact me anytime at 312-523-8174. Take it easy. Love you. And thank you very much.